You've noticed it, haven't you? That strange emptiness that appears precisely when you're supposed to be happy? You're doing everything right. You're chasing the dopamine hits, scrolling through possibilities, seeking the next experience, the next pleasure, the next anything that might make you feel something real. And yet, with each attempt to feel better, you feel less. It's like you're wrapping yourself in layers of numbness, one desperate attempt at a time. The more you reach for satisfaction, the further it retreats. The harder you try to feel good, the more mechanical your emotions become. You're pursuing feeling itself, and in that pursuit, feeling dies. Most people think this is a sign that they're broken, that they need to try harder, seek better experiences, find more intense pleasures. They think the problem is that they haven't found the right thing yet. The right relationship, the right career, the right city, the right whatever will finally make them feel alive again. So they keep searching, keep consuming, keep trying to feel something real. And with each attempt, the deadness spreads a little deeper. But what if I told you that this growing numbness isn't a sign that you're broken? What if the deadness you feel isn't something to be fixed, but something to be understood? What if the very act of trying to feel good is precisely what's killing your capacity to feel anything at all? This might sound paradoxical, perhaps even cruel, but stay with me, because what's happening to you is far more profound than simple emotional exhaustion. You're experiencing something that the philosopher Martin Heidegger spent his life trying to articulate. You're witnessing the collapse of what he called inauthentic existence. And though it feels like death, it's actually the first sign of something trying to come alive in you. Let me explain what you've been doing without realizing it. For most of your life, you've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about what it means to be human. You've believed that feeling good is the goal, that happiness is something to be achieved, that your emotional state is something to be managed and optimized like a piece of software. This isn't your fault. This is what you were taught. This is the water you've been swimming in. Heidegger called this mode of existence das Man, or the they. It's the way of being where you live, according to how one is supposed to live. One seeks pleasure, one avoids pain, one pursues happiness, one optimizes experience. You've been living as one, not as yourself. And the tragedy is that this way of being feels so normal, so obviously correct, that you never questioned it, until it stopped working. The mechanism you've been operating under is actually quite simple. You feel a hint of discomfort, a whisper of emptiness, a shadow of dissatisfaction. Immediately, automatically, you reach for something to make it go away. A scroll, a purchase, a distraction, a pleasure, anything to avoid sitting with the discomfort. This worked for a while. The discomfort would vanish, replaced by a small surge of satisfaction. You felt like you were managing your emotional life successfully. But here's what was actually happening. Each time you reached for something external to fix an internal state, you were training yourself to abandon your own experience. You were teaching yourself that your natural state is insufficient, that whatever you're feeling in any given moment needs to be different. You were fracturing yourself, creating a split between the you who experiences and the you who manages that experience. And in that fracture, something essential began to die. And if you're still here, recognizing yourself in these words, maybe it's time to subscribe. This isn't surface-level content. We go into these depths every single week. You know where the button is? The philosopher Schopenhauer understood this trap intimately. He observed that human beings are caught in an endless pendulum swing between pain and boredom. When we're in pain, we seek pleasure. When we achieve pleasure, it quickly becomes ordinary, and we fall into boredom. So, we seek new pleasures, more intense stimulations, anything to escape the boredom. But each new pleasure requires more intensity than the last, and the periods of boredom grow longer and more profound. He called this the hedonic treadmill, though he didn't use that term. He simply observed that we're striving beings, and striving without end is the very structure of suffering. You've been on this treadmill without knowing it, and now the treadmill is breaking down. This is what happened to you. Your capacity for pleasure hasn't disappeared because you're damaged. It's disappeared because you've exhausted it through constant use. You've been treating your emotional life like a resource to be extracted, and you've depleted the mind. Think of it this way. Imagine someone who lives in a house with beautiful windows overlooking a garden. But instead of looking through the windows, they spend all their time looking at photographs of gardens. They collect thousands of photographs. They categorize them, curate them, share them with others. The photographs give them a small thrill each time they acquire a new one. But gradually, the thrill diminishes, so they seek more photographs, rarer ones, more exotic gardens. The collection grows, but the satisfaction shrinks. One day they realize they feel nothing when they look at the photographs. They panic. They think something is wrong with them. They think they've lost their capacity to appreciate beauty. So they desperately search for better photographs, more striking images, anything that might recreate that original feeling. But no photograph works anymore. They feel dead inside. What they don't realize is that the real garden is still there, just outside their window. It's been there the entire time. But they've trained themselves so thoroughly to look at representations of gardens that they've forgotten how to simply look at the garden itself. Their eyes have adjusted to the flat, glossy surface of photographs. The real garden seems dull by comparison. It doesn't have the concentrated intensity of a curated image. It's just there, being what it is, requiring nothing from them, promising nothing to them. This is what's happening when you try to feel good and feel nothing instead. You've been looking at photographs of life while life itself happens unnoticed. You've been so busy trying to feel something that you've lost the ability to simply feel. The trying is the problem. The effort to feel good is precisely what makes feeling impossible. Now, most people, when they reach this point, do exactly the wrong thing. They try harder. They seek more intense experiences, more extreme pleasures, more dramatic ups and downs. They think the problem is that their current attempts aren't strong enough, aren't good enough, aren't enough, so they escalate. If this resonates with what you're experiencing, consider staying. We explore these uncomfortable truths every week. Hit subscribe if you're ready to go deeper. They might throw themselves into extreme sports, seeking the adrenaline rush. They might pursue increasingly intense romantic encounters, seeking the dopamine spike of new attraction. They might dive into substances, seeking chemical shortcuts to feeling alive. They might create drama in their lives, seeking the intensity of conflict and resolution. They're doing anything to feel something, anything, because the numbness has become unbearable. But here's what they don't understand. Intensity is not feeling. Stimulation is not aliveness. Pleasure is not presence. What they're seeking is actually a deeper form of absence, a more complete numbness disguised as its opposite. It's like someone who's cold putting on wet clothes. The clothes feel like something, they provide sensation, but they're actually accelerating the hypothermia. This is the trap that Heidegger saw so clearly. We flee from our own being. We stay busy, we stay stimulated, we stay consumed by the pursuit of feeling good, precisely to avoid encountering something more fundamental. We're running from what he called anxiety, though he didn't mean anxiety in the everyday sense. He meant that fundamental unease that appears when we stop distracting ourselves, when we stop managing our experience, when we simply are without trying to be anything in particular. This anxiety isn't a disorder. It's not something wrong with you. It's actually the most honest thing you can experience. It's the feeling of being a finite creature who exists without inherent purpose, without guaranteed meaning, without cosmic reassurance. It's the feeling of being free. And freedom is terrifying because it means you're responsible for what you make of your existence. There's no script to follow, no correct way to feel, no achievement that will finally make you okay. So we flee. We stay distracted. We pursue pleasure not because pleasure itself matters that much, but because pursuing pleasure keeps us from encountering this fundamental groundlessness. And the pursuit works, for a while, until it doesn't. Until the numbness you feel becomes so profound that even the pursuit stops working, and that's where you are now. But here's what you need to understand. This collapse isn't failure. This numbness isn't the end. It's actually the beginning of something else entirely, because you can only flee from your own being for so long before the exhaustion catches up with you. And when you stop running, when you have no choice but to stop because nothing works anymore, something extraordinary becomes possible. You can finally encounter what you've been running from. And what you've been running from isn't the enemy you thought it was. Heidegger called this mode of being eigentlich, which is awkwardly translated as authentic, but might better be understood as owned or ownmost. It's the experience of being yourself, not as a fixed identity, but as a living question. It's the experience of existing without trying to escape existence itself. And it has a quality that's completely foreign to the pleasure-seeking mode you've been operating in. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't typical content. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring these depths with us each week. This authentic mode doesn't feel good in the way you've been taught to value feeling good. It doesn't provide pleasure hits, or dopamine spikes, or satisfied contentment. It's not exciting. It's not even particularly pleasant. In fact, when you first encounter it, it might seem like nothing at all. It's so quiet, so simple, so ordinary that your mind, trained to seek intensity, might completely overlook it. Think of it this way. Imagine you've been living your entire life in a room filled with loud music, flashing lights, constant stimulation. The room is exhausting, but you've never known anything else, so you assume this is what life is. One day, the power goes out. Everything stops. The silence is so complete, so absolute, that it's almost violent. You panic. You think something is terribly wrong. You desperately try to get the power back on, to restore the noise and lights, because the silence feels like death. But if you can sit with it, if you can tolerate the discomfort of that silence for long enough, something strange happens. Your ears begin to adjust, and you start to hear things that were always there, but were completely drowned out by the noise. You hear your own breathing, you hear the subtle sounds of the world around you, you hear the quality of presence itself, and you realize that the silence isn't empty. It's full. It's just full of something so subtle that you needed the noise to stop before you could perceive it. This is the shift from inauthentic to authentic existence. The noise is the constant pursuit of feeling good, the endless management of your emotional state, the relentless seeking of pleasure and avoidance of pain. And the silence is what Heidegger called being toward death, which sounds morbid but is actually liberating. It's the recognition that you're finite, that your time is limited, that there's no final achievement that will make everything okay. And in that recognition, strangely, you become free to exist without the burden of trying to feel a certain way. You might think this sounds rather bleak. You might be wondering what the point is if we're not even pursuing happiness anymore. You might think I'm asking you to give up on feeling good and resign yourself to some kind of grim endurance. And I understand that resistance, because it's exactly what the pleasure-seeking mind would think. It can't imagine that there's anything valuable beyond its own terms. But consider this. The pursuit of feeling good requires constant effort, constant vigilance, constant management. You have to monitor your state, identify problems, implement solutions, seek new pleasures when old ones fade, all while pretending that this exhausting process is what you want to be doing. It's a full-time job with no vacation. And despite all that effort, it's making you more numb, more disconnected, more dead inside. What I'm pointing to requires no effort at all. In fact, it requires the opposite of effort. It requires letting go of the entire project of trying to feel a certain way. It requires stopping, sitting still, and encountering whatever's actually here. And yes, what's actually here might include discomfort, emptiness, anxiety, boredom, but it also includes something that the pleasure-seeking mind has completely missed. It includes the raw fact of being alive, of existing, of being here at all. And that fact, encountered directly rather than managed away, has a quality that doesn't translate into the language of feeling good or bad. It's not pleasant, but it's not unpleasant either. It's real. It's yours. It's the only thing that can't be taken from you, because it's not an experience you have, but the ground from which all experience arises. Let me tell you about someone who discovered this. Her name was Alina, and for most of her adult life, she was a pleasure optimization machine. She had systems for everything. She tracked her sleep, her exercise, her nutrition, her social interactions, all in service of maintaining an optimal emotional state. She curated her environment ruthlessly, eliminating anything that might bring discomfort. She had a 5-year plan, then a 10-year plan, all designed to create the perfect life where she would finally, consistently, feel good. And then her father died. Not tragically, not suddenly. He was old, it was expected. But something about his death cracked something open in her. She went through the funeral operating on autopilot, managing everything perfectly, being strong for her mother, handling all the logistics. But a few weeks later, sitting alone in her apartment, she felt it. The vast, yawning emptiness underneath all her systems and plans and optimizations, the fundamental groundlessness of existence itself. Her first response was typical. She tried to fix it. She threw herself into her routines with renewed intensity, as if the right combination of sleep and exercise and positive experiences could fill the void. But it didn't work. The void was still there, and now she couldn't stop feeling it. Every pleasure she pursued felt hollow. Every achievement felt meaningless. She was going through all the motions of her optimized life and feeling absolutely nothing. She spiraled for months, convinced she was broken, that she'd lost something essential. Until one evening, sitting on her couch, not even trying to do anything anymore, she simply stopped. Stopped trying to feel better, stopped trying to fix herself, stopped trying to manage the emptiness. And in that moment of complete surrender, something shifted. The emptiness didn't go away, but its quality changed. It stopped being something wrong that needed to be fixed and became simply what was true. She was a finite being, living a temporary life in a cosmos that offered no reassurance or inherent meaning. This fact, encountered directly, was terrifying, but it was also clarifying. It meant she could stop pretending, stop optimizing, stop trying to construct a life that would finally make her feel okay, because no life could do that. The project itself was impossible, and in the space where that impossible project used to be, something else appeared. Not happiness, not contentment, not any emotional state at all, but a kind of raw presence, a direct encounter with the fact of being alive. She could feel the air on her skin. She could taste her food. She could hear the traffic outside her window. Not because these things were particularly pleasant, but because she was finally present enough to notice them at all. She still felt pain, she still felt boredom, she still felt the fundamental groundlessness that her father's death had revealed. But she wasn't running from these things anymore. She wasn't trying to feel different than she felt. She was just there, being what she was, feeling what she felt, without the exhausting layer of trying to manage it all. And in that state, the question of whether she felt good or bad became almost irrelevant. She was simply alive, and that was enough. Not enough in the sense of satisfying or pleasant, but enough in the sense of real, of true, of hers. This is what authentic existence looks like. It's not transcendent or mystical. It's almost disappointingly ordinary. It's the experience of being yourself without apologizing for it, without trying to fix it, without needing it to be different. And yes, it includes everything you've been running from. The anxiety, the emptiness, the fundamental uncertainty of existence, but it also includes something that the pleasure-seeking mode entirely misses. It includes the fact that you're here at all. Now, I must warn you about something. You are in the middle of this process right now. The numbness you feel, the deadness inside, the sense that nothing matters anymore. This isn't the end state, this is the transition. This is what it feels like when one mode of being collapses and another hasn't fully emerged yet. And it's supposed to feel like death, because something is dying. Your entire structure of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, your whole project of trying to feel good, your lifelong habit of fleeing from your own existence, all of that is dying. And you're still here, you're still reading, which means you sense there's something beyond the numbness. Subscribe if you want to explore what that something is. We do this work every single week. Think of it like a snake shedding its skin. The old skin becomes tight, uncomfortable, restrictive. The snake must shed it to grow, but the process of shedding is vulnerable and difficult. The snake is neither fully in the old skin nor fully free of it. It's in between, and being in between is always uncomfortable. But it's not a sign that something is wrong, it's a sign that something is working. The discomfort is the process. The death is the transformation. Or consider a seed that must rot in darkness before it can germinate. From the seed's perspective, if it had one, the rotting would feel like annihilation. Everything that made it solid and self-contained is dissolving. It's losing its form, its boundaries, its identity as a seed. If the seed could fear, it would be terrified. But the rotting isn't the end. It's the necessary condition for growth. The seed must dissolve before the sprout can emerge. What feels like death is actually the mechanism of life. This is what's happening to you right now. Your pleasure-seeking structure is dissolving. The mode of being that organized your life around feeling good is rotting away, and it feels terrible because you're still identifying with that structure. still believing that structure is who you are, but it isn't. That structure was just a way of organizing experience, and it's outlived its usefulness. It's time for something else. So, what do you do? How do you navigate this transition? Here's what you must understand first. There is nothing to do, there is no technique that will make this process faster or easier or more comfortable. Any attempt to manage this transition is just the old structure trying to reassert itself. It's like trying to use the old skin to shed the old skin. It doesn't work. What you can do, however, is stop doing certain things. Stop trying to feel better. Stop seeking new pleasures to fill the void. Stop optimizing, managing, fixing, improving. Stop treating your emotional state like a problem to be solved. Every time you catch yourself reaching for something external to change how you feel inside, pause. Notice what you're doing, and then don't do it. This sounds simple, but it's extraordinarily difficult, because that reaching is so automatic, so deeply ingrained. You might not even notice you're doing it until you've already done it. But each time you notice, each time you catch yourself in the act of fleeing, you have a choice. You can follow the habit, or you can stay put. And staying put means sitting with whatever you were trying to escape. This is the practice, if we can call it that. Sitting with what is not in a therapeutic way, not as a technique for feeling better, but simply because you've exhausted all the alternatives, you've tried everything else. You've pursued every pleasure, sought every distraction, attempted every fix. And none of it worked. So you're left with what you were trying to avoid all along. The raw experience of being yourself, whatever that feels like in any given moment. And here's the extraordinary thing. When you stop running, when you stop trying to feel different, the quality of experience begins to shift. Not immediately, not reliably, not in any way you can control. But gradually, in moments, you'll notice that the emptiness isn't quite so empty. The boredom isn't quite so boring. The anxiety isn't quite so overwhelming. Not because these things have changed, but because you've stopped adding the layer of resistance that made them unbearable. The pain of pain is tolerable. What's intolerable is the pain of pain, plus the desperate wish that it be different, plus the self-judgment that you shouldn't be feeling this, plus the fear that it will never end, plus the frantic searching for a way out. That compound pain is what breaks us. But the original pain, met directly, is just sensation. It arises, it exists, it passes, it's real, but it's bearable. The same is true of emptiness. The emptiness itself is just space, just openness. What makes it unbearable is the story that this emptiness means something is wrong with you, that you should be feeling something more, that life should be fuller, richer, more intense. But those stories are optional. The emptiness itself is neutral. It's just what's here when you stop filling every moment with distraction and seeking. And if you're still with me in this exploration, maybe it's time to make it official. Subscribe to keep going deeper into these territories. We examine what most people spend their lives avoiding. So, what should you stop doing? Stop scrolling mindlessly when you feel the first hint of boredom. Stop reaching for your phone when you feel uncomfortable. Stop planning your next pleasure when the current one fades. Stop analyzing your emotional state as if it's data to be optimized. Stop comparing your inner experience to what you think you should be feeling. Stop trying to figure out what's wrong with you. Stop seeking advice on how to feel better. Stop consuming content about happiness and optimization and self-improvement. All of this is just the old structure trying to rebuild itself. Instead, do nothing. Sit still. Feel what you feel without trying to change it. Notice the impulse to reach for something and don't follow it. Watch your thoughts without believing them. Observe the emptiness without trying to fill it. Experience the groundlessness without trying to create ground. This isn't a technique for achieving anything. It's simply what happens when you stop trying to escape. And I know what you're thinking. This sounds passive. It sounds like giving up. It sounds like resignation to misery, but it's not. It's actually the most active thing you can do. Because everything else, all the seeking, all the trying, all the managing is actually passive. It's being pushed around by fear, by conditioning, by the habits your culture installed in you. Real activity is choosing to stop being pushed. Real freedom is no longer being run by the desperate need to feel different than you feel. This is what Nietzsche meant when he talked about amor fati, the love of fate. Not a passive acceptance of whatever happens, but an active embrace of what is, including the uncomfortable parts, including the parts that feel like death. Because what is includes your existence, your aliveness, the irreducible fact that you are here now, experiencing this moment. And that fact doesn't need to feel good to be valuable. It's valuable simply because it's real, because it's yours, because it's the only thing you actually have. The existentialist Kierkegaard understood this paradox deeply. He observed that we despair precisely when we try to be something other than ourselves. We see some image of who we should be happier, more satisfied, more fulfilled, and we compare our actual experience to that image. The gap between what is and what should be creates the suffering, but the solution isn't to work harder to close the gap. The solution is to abandon the image entirely, to stop believing in the should be and fully inhabit the is. This doesn't mean we become passive or stop growing or change nothing about our lives. It means we stop treating our existence as a problem to be solved and start treating it as a reality to be lived. And living reality means being present to whatever is actually happening, not constantly wishing we were experiencing something else. What's emerging in you now, beneath the numbness, isn't a new and improved emotional state. It's not happiness or contentment or peace, though these might appear sometimes as side effects. What's emerging is the capacity to be yourself without apology, without management, without the exhausting effort of trying to feel good all the time. It's the simple fact of your existence encountered directly rather than filtered through the endless project of emotional optimization. Heidegger would say, you're moving from existing as they exist to existing as you exist. You're no longer living according to how one is supposed to feel, what one is supposed to pursue, what one is supposed to value. You're discovering what it's like to exist without that script, without that guidance, without that reassurance. And yes, it's groundless. Yes, it's uncertain. Yes, it includes anxiety and emptiness and the fundamental recognition that nothing is guaranteed. But it's also free. It's yours. It's real in a way that the managed, optimized life never was. This is not loss. You haven't lost your capacity for pleasure or happiness or satisfaction. You've lost your dependence on these states, your belief that these states are what makes life worth living, and in losing that dependence, you've gained something far more fundamental.